Day and Night. Talks of agreements and treaties regarding, script for the production 70. Ely James. All rights reserved. 2023. Chapter 15. As valiant as were the soldiers of the United States in disposing of one of Earth's terrible despots in the area of Pakistan, so too in Israel's Mossad was the coalition of freedom fighters using their intelligence and special operation tactics valiant for Israel's nation. Security and for world stability. Leaving no stone unturned, Mossad had uncovered yet another imminent threat in the discovery of another undisclosed Iranian nuclear arms facility. The move to combat evil meeting with unanimous support, so we embark yesterday then, while in the company of certain confidants the Prime Minister had disguised his hand in preparation to get this mission underway sooner than folks could have anticipated. In short time the facility did meet with the fury of heated opposition. The news reels intermittently between flashes of interrupted stream rolling out for us the successful and remedial targeting leading to an apocalypse on a microcosmic level. Pertaining to forces committed, but grand-scale impact. In regards to formidably devastating force. The concern, however, scarcely was it in the handling of resolve that we'd seen before, but was in a ghastly detail that's rumor was overlooked, and like most rumors was it soon discounted. With the increase of the drying up of the Euphrates River was learned that in a remote portion of the ancient waterway on Iranian and neighboring border the disguising of a marsh-like riverbed run dry segued underground into a labyrinth of cave beneath ground that was far from portending a spotty drying. A river causeway beneath the river, yet unable to be detected by satellite or drawn to land map from overhead, as she was obfuscated by a dam construct not known by the public to have existed. Most unfortunate in how the basement floor to 2 layers of Euphrates sediment was discovered when the small child of 8 years old had fallen into the shored-up dam section, miraculously surviving as though newly outfitted with the lungs of the amphibian creature as region's only pocket of water there that dwindled after meeting with a cut and 90-degree redirection of terrain. Would be cause for outrageous and unbridled rejoicing as the child for the scuba divers sent down, and for his family had it not been for the munition stocks found with the testing residue inside. More than likely, if not already sold, then transported to some other facility, while elsewhere anti-aircraft missiles were discovered beneath ground. These poised for immediate launch. So said their positioning. From inside of this cavernous bunker with retractable hinge-work devices connecting to a bridgeworks dam that was as dry as bone. Yet this layer too was a decoy, as was she obfuscated by another dam extension under earth, crafted in earth to work with the items transferred there that had been camouflaged to a sense sink the entire hidden causeway even deeper. World at war. This tangle of epic proportions, the heading and understatement of all understatements, without fire-breathing locust, without the rising sea arch, and without mere provocation and world's oceans hemorrhaging blood red, yet blood red was the moon as the air was tinged crimson red, while the symbolic locusts revelator John did see 2 millennia ago. Behold, these were unchained mechanized beasts of fury in hot assault in scarcely insects. One man on the scene today spoke as though empirically and like none other on what the recorder of the apocalyptic vision did see. But in the choppers viciously angling through air, both day and night. Talks of agreements and treaties regarding wartime engagement, long forgotten now as men in these days only initiating such to craftily blind an enemy's sight so one could scarcely trust beyond one's own inkling. The common vernacular replaced today by descriptions like demonically charged air with terroristic events going on unappeased. Phrases sounding like catchphrases prevalent and on every stream of media, obliterated diplomacy severing the very thread of democracy's suggestion in even former democratic nations. Space. Phrases / prevalent and on every stream of media, obliterated diplomacy, severing the very thread of democracy's suggestion in even former democratic nations.
52.
Such word pairing as dominate and isolate replaced by devastate and obliterate. The rumors of war no more as the time of Jacob's trouble and Christian's adage apocalypse had demanded, apart from any new understanding, a renewed consideration that could fit only within this hour's, comprehending that like the days themselves was an uncommon one.
They're not coming out
These
until I'm
biblical
ready.
phrases taking on ghastly verb form and portending the words left to something other than what could be defined as the world still intact, rocked on its hinges and reeled on its moorings as oceans did in fact hemorrhage with oil spills. Widespread as lights in darkened patches of night from man's earth terra firma that shone in preeminence and domination over the air-shorn fabric that was God's sky above, where scorched terrain still quarreled with the flashes above mountains, hills, and water springs. Angels as tall as redwood trees, only thrice as massive at shoulder breadth, appeared up there. Archangel Michael and his squadron? Without introduction, how to know? Clearly the contests of wrestle and wrangle, revealing to the dark gray angels as beastly contenders and foe. Their description reading like a doctor's diagnosis when described as having skin of sulfuric gray speckle with mass oil contusion. Blackened patches comprising a gross disconfiguring when compared to the non-alien creatures, contrasting greatly with backdrop of night in angels that's wonder and awe-inspiring maneuvering of their did with them shine to reveal pristine wonder. The conclusion is set upon entrenching one fixed as though in sedimentary stone that was surnamed prophetic awareness, rapture expectation reduced from days expectation down to hours. Had / been reduced down to seconds. So set both the minds and hearts of men with fewer questions in reference to whether it was true. If this was indeed Earth's most terrible 7-year period of all of her any 7-year periods, men and war could become appeased by it, but what can tame these? President Dalton Benson, sometime after evening mealtime, standing in bewilderment alongside staff at the Oval Office with capsizing attention, watching live overhead coverage of what cut across the Mediterranean Sea like alien visitors, uninvited, fathoming surveyors' depths after the Euphrates' last drop of water had evaporated. Speaking while standing in front of televisions and taking in the mighty sight of it. By the word it referring to some definable thing underway, unlike whatever these drunken rapacious lurkers motoring about were. Do we make impressive inroads and surmount differences with a Mideast region peace treaty only to see an upending by something arranged by these? Should we invite them to the summit, or would that be viewed as something appallingly inciting? Get on that, Williams. Would you? The United States President said. With considerable investment, watching with his elbow to one arm pocketed inside of D. Accessibility. Document content. Text box multi-line. R. A. R. R. D. Y. Get on that, Rudy. Would you? The United States President said. With considerable investment, watching with his elbow to one arm pocketed inside of the torso, hugging other. Gazing in suspense while with dancing fingertips grazing mindlessly and lightly against his chin, with heated focus trained on the monitor screen. Good news. Maybe another handling of an inauspicious something that factors into, in way of defying unsatisfying poll results. Turn up the factor that matters most at polls in November. Seems your old pal Alistair Alexander Wentworth's given me a good whipping. As fearful as these froth up out there, which generated the assuring reply that sounded maybe as consoling as might a greeting of commiseration. Preliminary and untrustworthy, and from ragtag pollsters hired by opposition. Sir, dubiously comforted his aide sitting in a chair next to him while longitudinally sliding a pencil between his lips. Pausing to nibble at the eraser end. Guarantee yet. The electoral vote the college hands over to you. Removing his eyes from the screen, Dalton Benson with a languid smile patted the man strongly atop the shoulder. Turning to address person standing on the other armchair side of the man, the president said, "Look, is Alreem hyperbolic and smiling? He too expects the popular to acquiesce out furnish the sufficient votes to at end of teeth skin save my hide," to which came back, "I didn't say that. Sir. You did. More optimism suits you best. Mr. President. The motoring blender A. Accessibility. The motoring blender on its tantrum rattled and found a higher gear to the point of stopping either or both of breath and blood circulation. As attested the mostly inaudible responses redirecting unto return of discourse again. From the Sinbad's Adventures collection. Given their mass and size and clunky manner of maneuvering about and the intrepid regard these from a distance generate. As capable of evil as they might be, so help us God, they're here only to do the inestimable good, so it was said. Fathomably as tall as what glided, or devoured, seemed the surfaces of large bodies of water. Large gyrating fountains and cascading falls suspending harrowingly in air and whipping about. Both collapsing and unfolding on throttling wheels that's ball bearings dizzyingly shake loose inside of wheel sockets as humongous organs sloshing about within some invisibly hemming that were like pericardium sacs of a kind constraining the tsunami rapids formations. Twice as tall as were the members of this ominous quartet, wide and portending a grievous and remorseless prognostication if scarcely divining impact. Tall springs endowed with something other than random wantonness and with calculating menace that would into vast oceans totally collapse when seeming to empty before reaching tall and skyward again. Howling about and seeming only in mind's imagination to descend from the darkened stormy sky overhead with patches of open lurking high over top of them only because the vast open air scarcely exhibited a concern to these ones seeming to convene over top of their commissioning. Breaking and gushing torrents as breakaway beasts in lurid phantoms whipping and whipping in an unappeased animalistic howling tantrum emanating from some wicked sonorous bass drone and challenging limitations to things like basic and inherent fear that was evidenced in a compounding hot uncontainable unrest in hearts of people seized by these angels from inside of picture boundary and margin only where their physical dimensions generated effects slip out of margin. Framed within the immensity to these breathing ghouls from heaven's quickened memory capacities fast resolved database sent only where materializing on man's short-circuiting databit chunk lethargy fitted to all things but quickened upload and processing speed and frolicking with water shoals given corporeal body where the cones teeming with fish both whirled about and flitted like sparrows and steeds untamed. At the strong instigating suggestion of the wrathful whirling and howling cones in these four bombastic formations. The unthinkable happened when these grew in size and intensified in whirling fury. The widest portion constituting head in these unnatural items making like aquatic nomads enraged and of some domains indigenous keep somewhere given to the trust of nature to define them trading on and about shift and becoming like slushing and stomping feet slapping at the rebuked ocean bodies as the four Tasmanian fountain structures with arms, legs and wings rove about and eerily move on in and evenly within their trapezoidal incandescent conflagrations appearing to either revoke license of night by revivifying against twilight's disrepair the defying light of day, only appearing to be close, one to the other, when was one separated miles apart from the next in these indomitable cones of terrible pelagic distress with premonitions consisting of several streamlets that's greatest fear amid uncontainable unrest in hearts of the people was captured in the mere sight of nature's fiendish play in these cyclonic rage formations motoring perniciously and once collapsing like umbrellas overtaken by blistering winds they in dizzying fury and speed lurched forward again. As quickly reviving and resisting a rapacious fury as release before the head of the airborne Gogolian bodies somewhat appearing distinctly defined from one distant body end to the other, longitudinally and latitudinally, as had the hovering land angels appeared or even man. In other words, there was an intelligent designer involved here. Rapacious fury convulsing in tornadic thrusts of malicious intent devouring ocean body and seizing atop of minds of spectators has shifting wobbly orientation in all of its disorienting shapes of an already compounded fear. Quick segue.